Greetings everyone. Today I'd like to show you my Dead Space armor I made out of cardboard. And did cosplay and entered the contest and did not win, but I did have a fun experience. Now when I was in college, I first looked upon Dead Space and I was like really intrigued with the armor and I started making the helm. And once I was done making like the helm, it was a really shitty helm. Not very good. However, I made another one. And then eventually I made like a full upper body suit. Unfortunately, as extravagant as I wanted it to look like, the upper body suit, the Dead Space upper body suit that I made, uh, wasn't very durable. It was quite feeble and it broke off very easily. Which brings us to the year 2022, like right after I graduated. And when I saw this like cosplay contest in my local city, so I realized, what's the one cosplay that I know how to build? And I realized, yeah, the Dead Space suit, like that. Oh, this is an opportunity, to experience something I never had because when I was building my previous Dead Space armor, it was during the pandemic and I couldn't like walk around it, nor could it survive, being walked around. And so first I had to like retrace my steps. And what took me around 3 years to make now took me 3 weeks. Now, the first thing I did, of course, was make the dome. The dome was the most crucial part for the helmet because without the dome, there is no foundation. And if there's anything important in building anything, whether it is like cosplay or art in general or anything in general, it's the foundation. And the dome, and for the helmet, the dome is sort of like the foundation for everything. By making that, it was quite easy. I just roughed out a faceplate and then just added in details, from very big bulky shapes, and over time making it into like more finer detailed shapes. And it's like sculpting but with cardboard. Next up was the rig. If you're going to build like a Dead Space armor, start with the helmet, the rig. Two very significant parts of the cosplay itself, of the Dead Space engineer armor specifically. And so for the rig, I like took like again a big chunk of a thick cardboard base, and then for the tube of the rig specifically, I used the metal of the soft drink cans and then some plastic from food containers to like create the tube. So one side was the metal, one side was transparent plastic, and I would put like the LED between that. So that's how it went. And then after that was the front of the body, which essentially, for all of these steps, essentially it's just following the reference. And it's kind of the most important thing. Just follow the reference. Don't worry. Just get a picture of whatever it needs to be and just follow the reference. But moving on, for the body, again, I used a thick cardboard. So as you can see, it's pretty thick there. And then just pasted like the chest piece. After that, I now had like the chest piece and the rig. And before putting it on, I first made a belt system. Now this belt system is pretty important because what it allows you to do is put most of the weight on your hips rather than on your shoulders, which might break the straps or anywhere. So yeah, make the belt system so that your hips can carry a lot of the weight. And then of course add some straps to connect like the front and the back piece. And then after that I added in the plates, which is basically just rectangles, rectangles everywhere. And then made the arm. The arm was just serrated rectangles. Basically, again, it's all just serrations and rectangles. It's not that complicated. And then after that is the plasma cutter. Now plasma cutter I built like, now you could build this out of like a toy gun, but I just built it out of cardboard. So as you can see, it's pretty thin, the exact opposite of your mom. But yeah. So yeah, it's just cardboard. Everything is cardboard. Everything is cardboard. It's like that meme, like everything is cake. But in this case, everything is cardboard. So with the plasma cutter, made that out of cardboard as well. It's just basically, again, big, simple shapes, and then further along it gets to smaller, more finer shapes. You just mold it by basing the reference. And then the boots. I didn't really document the boots very well. Again, it's a very boring process, but yeah, it's the same thing. Just base the reference, measure your, what do you call this, leg size, the circumference and everything, and yeah, you're good to go. So I proceeded to paint them. And as you could guess, I only used three paints. Three paints. Black, white, and copper. So for the gray, it's just basically a mixture of black and white. For the copper is just copper. The copper is just copper. And yeah, very simple. And after I did like the base painting, I did very simple black dry brushes to give it some wear and tear. But it's a very cartoonish looking wear and tear. I wouldn't recommend, but it does give it some grit, which is sort of the overall feel of Dead Space. It needs to have grit, because if it was just base colored copper and black and white, it doesn't really emanate much of that Dead Space feel. But nonetheless, it was time for the test fitting, and this was before the electronics. And when I test fitted it, as you can see, I had a bit of fun with it. But yeah, everything was going ship-shack. The build system was going good. The structure of everything was pretty based. And once the test fitting was a success, I proceeded to install the lights. And the lights are basically just LEDs. I won't get much into the electronics because it's rather simple, but if you don't know what you're doing, it might be a bit complicated. However, there are many resources on the internet. You just find how to wire up LEDs and you'll be fine. So for example, here in my plasma cutter, it's literally just 3 LEDs in series. And so that's, now, blue LEDs are usually around 3 volts forward voltage. So if there's 3 blue LEDs in series, it's like 3 plus 3 plus 3. It needs at the very least 9 volts to be powered. So I've got a 9-volt battery here. Now for my helmet, it's a bit complicated because there's like a lot of LEDs here, a lot of LEDs, a lot of LEDs. And it's a combination of both parallel and series connections. And so, yeah, you're gonna have to figure that out yourself, but the suit still looks fine even without lights. So if you're not gonna be planning on putting on lights, it would still be fine, honestly. But I wanted to challenge myself. The ironic part is that for the lights, the challenge was not necessarily the calculations of the LED, the battery and everything, and the resistance. No, the real challenge came with like the connections, because everything in the suit is moving. And so you had to make sure that your connections were fit, they were strong, and they wouldn't be, easily broken. And my God, the most unfortunate thing happened. The first time I wore the suit outside, the connections, the battery connections to the rig, the back, got broken instantly because I did not check it, and even during the contest, it flickered a bit. It flickered, and yeah. If you're doing lights, the first thing you should, very important, the strength of your connections, like both mechanically and electrically, but usually mostly mechanically, because it was the mechanical connections that kind of ruined the lights of my suit when I was like wearing it. So that's one thing to take care of. And so like with the lights done, I proceeded to like test fit it, and it was pretty fine, at least fine in my home where I wasn't moving a lot. I was still moving, but I wasn't moving a lot, so not much of the mechanical connections weren't so disturbed until I went outside for real, and kind of like it's kind of where it got tested, and didn't really succeed very well. Fortunately, like the power for the, what do you call this, the plasma cutter and the helmet were separate. As you can see, they're all separate sources. And since it was only the rig that failed, my helmet and my plasma cutter were still fine. So I still had like 2 out of 3 lighting systems on, so it wasn't really that of a failure. Finally, you know, it's one thing to build stuff for your own. It's another thing to be able to present it and to show it to the world. You know, that was my problem when I was building the suit in the pandemic, was because I had no one to show it to. To myself, yeah, it was pretty cool. You know, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. You know, when I first made my rugged Dead Space cosplay during pandemic, this is the best thing ever. But with no one to share it with, it just, felt a little bit empty. And which is why I was pretty happy with what happened now, because I got to share what I made with people. And, you know, I thought that people would just disregard it, but many people actually like took pictures with me, and it was very nice. It was very cool. As for the contest, I didn't win the contest, but I didn't care. I wasn't really expecting much for the contest, but then again, the people who won in the contest, like, they deserved it very much so. So that's the end of this little adventure I had with my Dead Space cosplay. And looking back at it, you know, it was quite cringe. A 23-year-old guy doing cosplay. That's cringe, bro. But now that I think about it, now that I reflect upon it, you know, if I didn't do this, I would have regretted it. What if I never did this? What if I never made the cosplay? I never joined the contest? I never walked around in my big cardboard suit? What would happen? Life would have just went on, and I would still be here right now, just without that experience. I would live to regret, because opportunities like that, they're, at least in my life, it's not very common. And it would and doing it didn't really waste my time. It actually made good use of my time. I was able to like practice skills that I've always wanted to use and wanted to develop, and I was able to with all these things lining up. So yeah. And it was quite uncomfortable going outside and wearing my cosplay. It was a 23-year-old guy. What the fuck? But if I never did it, I would have never faced that discomfort. I would have never faced that fear. I would have never overcome it. I would have never, lived what I wanted to do. I would have never, what do you call this? I would have never fulfilled what I set out to do, because this was something I wanted to do for a very long time, ever since I was a kid. Now the opportunity presents itself, I would not have it wasted. So perhaps what others can take away from this is that you should do something out of your comfort zone, to do something real, even if it's just something creative. Because the feeling of making something with your hands that you're able to see, feel, touch, and wear, it's like it's an experience unlike any other. To create something. It's not like creating a business. That's a different thing. It's a different story. But to create something like out of this world, well, at least the illusion of being out of this world. Don't worry, I just turned it off. It's not broken. But yeah. And so that would be all, I guess. And yeah. Oh, well, I got this out of my chest now. Well, goodbye then, and I hope you have a nice day.